for salvation either in Red Hat. He promised in his election campaign to turn to the trade unions. He didn't even turn up to the demonstration on the 19th of October in Central Hall, so timid and afraid he was. He's admitted in the last week, by the way, that he doesn't read fiction, he doesn't believe in fiction. Well, why is he in New Labour, by the way? It's a fiction that they stand for working class people at the present time. Isn't it incredible that we have a movement of millions, we have so-called generals that are flying the white flag, and on the television we had the other night Lily Savage and Paul O'Grady in a live broadcast denouncing this government in the most vitriolic terms. He even challenged, as Alex did, the parentage of the members of the government itself. I'm too polite to repeat it. And in his own immortal lines he said, Osborne or Cameron, these people who were cheering in the House of Commons, these are the people who would cheer when Bambi's mother was shot in a picture. He should be leading the demonstrations of working class people in Britain at the present time. £81 billion worth of cuts, the worst cuts we've seen since 1922, over a period of 4 years. It does not bear thinking about the human reality behind these cuts. 1 million workers forced out of their homes. Look at the synthetic outrage which greeted Boris Johnson when he happened for once to be telling the truth, when he said the plans of the government represent social cleansing. In effect, it means, as one Tory minister confessed to the editor of the Evening Standard, he said this is on the scale of the hiring clearances, where millions of croppers, tens of thousands of croppers at least, were forced out of their position. We have a mass unemployment now that is endemic. Cindy is absolutely correct as far as this is concerned. It's a catastrophe in the US. It is equally a nightmare for working people in Britain. 1.6 million will be added to the unemployment level, already just below 4 million if these cuts go through. Claire has given us a glimpse of the terrible attacks on youth, and that's an attack on the future of society itself. Let us hope that that mean cut in the educational maintenance grant for 16 to 19-year-olds, that the youth will rise up in Britain and organise the strikes as we did in 1985 in the universities and in the schools. They will try and split the working class as they always do. They will try and divide the youth against all the workers. In France, the commentators were absolutely dumbfounded when young people came out in support against the attacks on the pensions. And we had commentators in this country saying, but they'll only be affected in 50 years. They had the sense to see that if this attack went through, they would be next in line and the working class as a whole would be affected. And they came up with a marvellous slogan, let us strike until we retire. Not a bad idea. So it's obvious we must reject the cuts. It's obvious we must fight against the cuts. And we must mobilise the most widespread action, as comrades have said from this platform, against the cuts itself. But what is the alternative to the programme of the government? There is perplexity, there is a confusion in the minds of working people. And if we are going to be successful in this campaign, we must come forward with clear explanations of why, but also of how the government is likely to be defeated itself. In a sense, The capitalists and their governments are right when they say that because of the huge deficit, the bond vigilantes will come and will attack the currency of a country in this situation. They're absolutely correct. And the burden will be placed upon our shoulders of something like, it's about £273 for every man, woman and child in Britain. What is our answer to that argument that somebody has to pay? We say yes. But why should we pay this debt? Why don't we emulate what the Greek colleagues have raised, the cancellation of the debt? But if you're going to do that, you have to have the mechanism to beat off the conspiracy of capital, which means the nationalisation of the banks under workers' control and management. If you do not do that, as a step towards controlling the levers of economic power, all the words that come forward to fight the cuts mean very little in the long run. Because we have to answer the question of why this crisis is taking place at the present time. It's not, despite the odious characters in government, purely because of the personal role of George Osborne. They themselves, you have to give them credit, at least represent their class. They represent capitalism and are acting to the laws of capitalism itself. This is a crisis of the system. It's not personal. It's the incapacities of capitalism, which is a system that's based upon production for profit, which is the unpaid labour of the working class. The working class cannot buy back the full product of their labour, and the capitalists solve that problem by reinvesting back into industry. But that recreates the problem at a later stage. That's why we have this crisis at the present time. Added to it is the biggest bubble in history of the financial weapons of mass destruction that the capitalists in the US and Britain and Japan piled up over a period of 30 years. They are not going to escape from this crisis easily. We are going to pay the price for this. We've already paid the price in America, with 8 million workers emptied out of the factories, and more to follow, where openly the spokesman of American capitalism said the ideas of the past, that today was better than yesterday and tomorrow will be better, and so on. In other words, the idea, the religion of capitalist progress, that has been shattered by this crisis. You may not have a 1930s type depression. You could have, however, the long depression that existed in the last 19th century with unemployment stuck at 10, 11, 12%. It's a myth, by the way, that there's only 10% unemployed in the US. There's at least another 7, 8, 9, 10%. That doesn't take account of the position in Europe with 20% of people unemployed. What is that if not a depression? And what a terrible mirror it shows up to us for the peoples of the world if this system is allowed to continue. Britain has lost 10% of production already in this crisis. There's a recovery underway, according to the spokesman of the system itself. The economy grew last quarter by 0.8%. The mountain was laboured and it's produced a mouse. That's the reality. Of course, a recovery always takes place under capitalism at a certain stage. The question is, will it be a sustained recovery? Will it produce a situation where the period of yesterday is restored? No. We face a drawn-out agony of capitalism and therefore of the working class itself. And when Cindy spoke about standing in the US as a symbol of the revolt of working class people, that represents a colossal step forward. The Tea Party itself